Hey everyone, and welcome to our next entry in our visual class guide series. Today we'll be covering Scholar, so let's just jump right into it. Scholar is a healer focused around preventative shielding before the damage happens, as opposed to reactive healing like the White Mage. This is accomplished through the use of a few different mechanics, which we will cover in this next section. First, let's talk about Galvanize. Your shield comes in two forms. In single target shielding, you have Adloquium, and for group-wide protection, you have Succor. As you can see here, Adloquium has a much higher potency, with the trade-off of only affecting one player, while Succor has half the potency, but affects the entire party. Both these abilities apply a buff called Galvanize. Here, you can see Succor being applied to the entire party before a raid-wide attack hits. If you watch closely, you'll see the Galvanize buff drop off the party as the attack lands. However, the damage was drastically reduced from a potentially lethal blow down to a very manageable hit. It's important to always be aware of what attacks are coming next by paying attention to the target cast bar. A Scholar that doesn't shield the attacks is going to struggle trying to make up for the damage taken by the party. There are a couple of different modifiers that can be used with your shield spells to strengthen their effects or to get some emergency healing if needed. These modifiers are Deployment Tactics, which is used to spread the Galvanize buff to the rest of your party, and Emergency Tactics, which, in place of a shield, doubles the effect of Galvanize and heals for that amount instead. In this next clip, you will see Adloquium being applied to a single target, and then Deployment Tactics being used to spread that increased shield to the entire party. This is a very strong combination because, like Succor, it allows you to shield the entire group but at a much higher potency. This should be used whenever you have a situation where an enemy has an AoE ability that cannot be avoided and needs to be dealt with. Right here you see Galvanize buff drop off and a massive amount of damage sustained by the party. This clearly would have been a lethal blow had those shields not been in place beforehand. You can also see Emergency Tactics being used along with Succor in order to get out a much needed raid-wide heal in response to the extreme damage taken beforehand. This clearly demonstrates the importance of preventative shielding, as if those shields hadn't been in place, there would have been no one left to try and heal after the fact. Next, we will go over our direct healing abilities. These come in the form of Physic and Lustrate for your single target heals, and Indomitability for your group-wide heal. These can be further boosted by the use of Largesse to increase healing potency of spells by 20% for 20 seconds. It is important to note that Largesse only affects spells and as such will not increase the healing done by abilities such as Indomitability and Lustrate. Here you will see an example of how Largesse increases the healing potency of our direct heals and your shields. On screen you will see a couple of columns. On the left are the healing numbers without Largesse, and on the right will be the boosted healing. Notice that the exclamation point at the end of a couple healing casts. This indicates that a heal was critical. Just like a DPS character hits for boosted critical damage, your heals can do the same. These are very nice when they happen, but should be disregarded for the purpose of this example. Now that we have covered our basic healing and shielding actions along with the modifiers for them, it's time to move into the lifeblood of the Scholar, and that is your Aether. Aetherflow is the main mechanic of the Scholar class, and if you have ever played Summoner, then this mechanic should come naturally to you. Managing your stacks of Aether will define not only your overall healing ability, but your DPS and mana management as well. Your first ability is Aetherflow. Aetherflow restores 10% of your maximum MP, and depending on your current level, grants 1, 2, or 3 stacks of Aether. At level 6, you gain the trait Aetherdam. This allows you 1 stack of Aether. At level 20, you get Aetherdam 2, granting you 2 stacks, and at level 40, you get your final trait Aetherdam 3 for a total of 3 stacks. At level 68, you gain a trait called Quickened Aetherflow. This key trait reduces your Aetherflow recast time by 5 seconds each time you use an ability that spends a stack. This translates to a 15-second reduction in cooldown for your building ability. For your Aether spending, you have Excogitation, unlocked at level 62, a very powerful healing ability which we will specifically discuss in a bit. Next, you have Indomitability, the level 52 ability with a 500 potency group-wide heal that we discussed in the previous section. Sacred Soil, which is unlocked at level 45, is an AoE shield that reduces all damage taken by 10% for 15 seconds within its area. Lustrate, the single target heal with a potency of 600, unlocked at level 50. And finally Bane, a DPS ability you receive at level 50 that spreads your damage over time abilities to all nearby enemies within a 30 yalm radius. It is very important to balance how you utilize these various abilities to ensure that they are both maximizing your DPS and also keeping your party in the fight. Next, I want to take a brief moment to cover Excogitation. Excog is a very powerful healing ability with a fire and forget kind of mechanic. Once cast on a party member, for the next 45 seconds, if their health drops below 50%, they will receive an automatic 800 potency cure. This is a great tool in the Scholar's kit for dealing with attacks such as tank busters. In the next clip you'll see this in action. Here, you can see the warrior that is currently holding aggro on the boss has Excog applied to them already, as indicated by the first green buff icon on his status bar. If you watch, you will see the buff drop off as a large hit lands. This tank buster could have been potentially fatal, but Excog kicks in immediately and heals his health, leaving him at around 19k. Next up, we will cover the fun stuff, DPS. The difference between a good healer and a great healer is their ability to not only keep you alive in the fight, but also contribute to the group by putting out a respectable DPS. You have a few different ways of doing this, so let's get started. First are dots, or damage over time abilities. You have Miasma and Miasma 2. It is important to note here that Miasma 2 is an AoE ability, hitting enemies within a 5 yalm radius of the caster. Both of these abilities can be stacked on the enemy at the same time. Miasma, unlocked at level 10, deals a 35 potency dot over 24 seconds, while Miasma 2 is unlocked at level 46 and has a 25 potency over 12 seconds. Similar to the Miasma spells, Bio, unlocked at level 2, deals 40 potency over 18 seconds, and Bio 2, unlocked at 26, deals 35 potency over 30 seconds. The difference here is that once Bio 2 is unlocked, you will no longer have access to Bio 1, unless you play content that scales your level down below 26. Finally, you have Bane. This ability is what makes your dots a great source of damage. Bane, at the cost of 1 ether stack, spreads your dots to all nearby enemies within a 25 yalm range. It is important to note here that Bane does have diminishing returns. The potency of your dots is reduced by 20% for the second enemy it hits, 40% for the third, 60% for the fourth, and 80% for every remaining enemy. There is, however, a 15% chance that the Bio and Miasma duration will be reset upon casting Bane. For your single target damage, you have Ruin and Ruin 2, with Ruin being your stationary DPS, and Ruin 2 being your mobile DPS as it has no cast time. At level 54, you unlock Broil Mastery, which upgrades Ruin into Broil, and again at level 64, you unlock Broil Mastery 2, which further upgrades Broil into Broil 2, leaving you with Broil 2 as your source of stationary DPS, and Ruin 2 as your on-the-move damage. Next, we have our AoE DPS abilities. The first being Shadow Flare, a direct AoE ability that places a 25 yalm circle down at your chosen location and deals a 50 potency dot every second to all enemies inside. It also has the additional effect of slow by 5%. Second, you have Bane to spread your dots to nearby enemies, which we covered in the previous section. For our DPS modifiers, we have Cleric Stance and Change Stratagem. Cleric Stance, unlocked at level 8, increases your attack magic potency by 5% for 15 seconds, and Change Stratagem, unlocked at level 66, increases the rate at which your target takes critical hits by 15% for 15 seconds. This second buff is useful to your entire team, so it's important that you plan accordingly in order to reap the maximum benefit from it. Here is an example of a pure DPS rotation being used on a training dummy. Some issues to note here are that for party or raid compositions, you should always communicate to make sure that Change Stratagem is being used at the most optimal time for your team comp. For your dots, it is important that you always keep them up. You don't want to let them drop off, but you also don't want to clip them, meaning cast too early. You should begin recasting your dot with roughly 3 to 4 seconds remaining. Last, mana management is important, and if you have no other use for your ether stacks and your cooldown for Aetherflow is almost up, you should burn those stacks with energy drain in order to keep yourself topped off on MP. Moving on to pet abilities. Your pet is another major mechanic of the Scholar class. You have 2 fairies to choose from, so let's cover their individual and sometimes shared skills. First, on the Aeos side, you have Embrace, a 250 potency heal that will be cast on the member with the lowest health automatically. Second, you have Whispering Dawn, a heal over time ability that heals all nearby party members for 100 potency for 21 seconds. Next is Fey Covenant, which increases the magic defense of all nearby party members by 20% for 20 seconds. And last is Fey Illumination, which increases spell-based HP restoration of all nearby party members by 10% for 20 seconds. On the Selene side, again you have Embrace, which functions exactly the same as Aeos. You have Silent Dusk, which simply silences the target for 1 second, preventing them from casting any spells. Fey Caress, which removes a single debuff from every member in your party that is within range of Selene, basically a party-wide Asuna. And finally, Fey Wind. Fey Wind reduces all weapon skills and spell cast and recast times by 3%, while also reducing the party's auto attack delay by 3% as well. The second part of your pet mechanic is your Fairy Gauge. You accumulate Fey Ether by casting any ability that consumes or spends Ether stacks, such as Excognition, Energy Drain, and Lustrate. When you are ready to spend your Fey Ether, you do so by casting Fey Union, which connects your fairy to your target with a tether that heals for 480 potency every 3 seconds for a maximum of 30 seconds at 100% gauge. Some important notes here are that other abilities cannot be used by your fairy while channeling Union. If currently casting an ability, your fairy will finish its cast and then begin channeling Union with your target, so keep that delay in mind. And last, while channeling, your fairy is locked in place. If your target moves outside of its 15 yalm range, then the Union will break, but your fairy will still be locked in place. Last, we are going to put together all of the information we covered today by showing how to handle large pulls and still effectively DPS. In this section, Heavenly will be doing a slower rotation so you can see what's going on, as during a real fight it all happens extremely fast. You can follow along with abilities being used on the left hand side to help you keep up. This rotation is a very general guideline on how to handle large pulls. With healers, nothing is set in stone, so you need to take this information and apply it as necessary, making adjustments as the situation calls for it. Now, you can see what we just covered in the previous section in action at full speed. Notice how there are various differences in the order of the abilities used. As I said before, you will have to learn the various situations and how to react to them yourselves, as every encounter is different. Your team composition, the amount of DPS putting out by the group, the individual skill level of your tank, all of these are variables that you'll have to take into consideration while you are running content in order to maximize your contribution to the group. At the end of the day, Scholar, along with the 2 other healers, are very fluid classes. Nothing is ever set in stone, and the thing that will set you apart from others is your ability to recognize situations, quickly evaluate them, and adjust your playstyle accordingly. Well, that's it for now, guys. We hope this guide has been a good source of information for you to get started wrapping your mind around playing Scholar. If you prefer a written guide, please see the additional info section below for a link. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, groans, moans, complaints, or issues, leave them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you soon on the next class guide.